Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Race Reaction podcast. And today's episode is going to be, well, I guess a classic one that we haven't done for a while. We're going to be looking back at the 1999 Startlight cheating scandal. Um, this was sparked by a tweet that I saw earlier this week from Hightower Frenson, who just reminded me of it. I guess we both knew about it, but I thought it'd be great to do a deep dive into it. So we're going to, I guess, go through what it was, teams that are involved, and all the controversy that ensued after that. Right, should we get stuck in? Um,
Let's.
okay, so, well, the thing you have to remember is that with the Startlight procedure back in the olden days, so it's about 20 years ago now, the Startlights were controlled from race control using a sort of electronic system primitive to what they have now. Um, and then when each light comes on, a signal passes through, and it passes through multiple things, which, as you'll later find out, was the basis of this scandal. It passes through, well, various things. So the race control box, the wiring loom, the bridge gantry, and then the circuits that extinguish the lights that make them go out. Um, a tiny electrical signal is transmitted milliseconds before the lights go out, which is known as a command pulse. And that eventually would be the thing that I guess you could say exposed all of these teams. I'll say all of them, only a handful of them. Um, and well, the F1 teams realized they could sniff or intercept this signal that was sent to the lights by putting sensors in the nose cones and the front wings of the cars back in the day, um, which would allow the drivers to, I guess, get a warning of when the lights would go out. Um, and then the driver would basically have a little ping in their radio, and they would know when to exactly just launch. And it basically looked like a handful of drivers on the grid got a near perfect start. Um, the team's rumored to have, I guess, conspiracy against the FIA were McLaren, Benetton, Williams, and occasionally Ferrari, um, which is what the documents have revealed. Um, I guess I've explained that well. What do you think, Miles? Should we move on to, I guess, yeah, a bit more detail into the teams?
Yeah, so in this era of the late 90s, obviously it was a time of a lot of technical advancement. I mean, I say that every year of Formula One is all about technical advancement, but at this point it was stuff that are quite modern features as we know today. Some, are part of road cars, as is sort of the point of motorsport. With like hybrid technology starting in motorsport, making its way into road cars. So things that these teams had supposedly developed were things like launch control. So there was a bit of a controversy about Ferrari having it, Michael Schumacher using it to his advantage to set rapid lap times and things like that. ECUs that were more complex than other teams, automatic clutch control and stuff like that, to make it so that it's essentially impossible for a driver to fluff a start, which we have seen before. We've seen people stall on the grid, and there have been a few accidents that it's caused. So the rumours in the second half of the 1999 season in the paddock were that McLaren, Ferrari, Jordan as well, and Williams had all sort of cracked the secret to the start signal light. It was never proven at that point. It was just a rumour. But it then led to the FIA catching wind of it and investigating.
Yeah, well, I guess the interesting thing here is that, you know, this second half of 1999, um, which you'll remember was won by Mika Hakkinen, all people, um, was a period where all of those teams that you just mentioned were getting their record starts. So I guess a few people from the FIA realized that all these teams were reacting to the signal rather than actually visually the drivers reacting to the lights going out. Um, so herein lies the scandal or the trap that the FIA played. And, you know, credit where it's due, the FIA nowadays perhaps wouldn't be this ambitious, perhaps, I'm not sure. But this is an example of, you know, that the FIA was good at some point in time, even though that was over a quarter of a century ago. Anyways, so yeah, at the 99 European Grand Prix, at Nürburgring, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Yes, oh, what a great track. We, I'm not gonna start. I'm not
No
starting that
rants
rant
today.
again. Um, but yeah, anyways, at the 1999 European Grand Prix, the officials delayed the command signal and masked it. So the teams that were originally intercepting this and using it to their advantage, they changed it and they disabled the usual one that would be sent out. Um, this would mean that the drivers of teams relying on the signal that were cheating, quote unquote, would react early before the actual lights went out. And if this was true, it would actually expose who was cheating. Um, and yeah, I guess we had loads of cars. I think if you there's a video that actually prompted this episode, which Tara Franson tweeted the other day, and yeah, it was him on pole. Next to him was Coulthard and McLaren, and then Hakkinen in P3. Uh, and yeah, the first start attempt, and this is why I think it's a conspiracy. It's really, I guess, shady because the whole way the FIA could do this was through an aborted start. And there was an aborted start because backmarker cars of Alex Zanardi and Mark Genet, who I actually saw at Goodwood this year. Love Mark Genet. Um, they were in the wrong grid slots, so it was an aborted start. Um, so the drivers went round for another formation lap uh, and then lined up again. And the aborted start forces the start system into a rarely used non-standard sequence. So it it essentially makes I don't know makes the trap even more like perfect for the FIA to execute at the Grand Prix. But yeah, do you want to, I guess, talk about the drivers who was involved? Because quite a few actually, if you think about it, quite a few
Yeah. So
known
just as we
drivers.
just as we discussed, the drivers at the top teams, so McLaren, Ferrari, Jordan, and Williams too, pretty much all of them jumped the start very clearly. There's if you go onto YouTube, you watch the replay. There's a view of the cars on the grid, and then above it is a zoom in of the five lights. The five, it goes one, two, three, four, five, stays on five, and then the cars of Mika Hakkinen, David Coulthard, so both McLarens, Eddie Irvine for Ferrari, and then Heinz Harald Frentzen for Jordan, who was on pole. All of them move and launch before the five lights go out. So couldn't be any clearer that all of them had some prior knowledge of when the lights should have gone out. But as Manav just explained, the FIA tweaked it to not actually go out and expose who was cheating. So if you watch the replays, you'll see that both McLaren sort of move a little bit, twitch very slightly before the lights go out, implying that they were ever so minutely releasing the clutch and moving the car. Very subtle, but you can see it in the replays, and it happens these days as well. I think Kimi Antonelli, just in the last race at Las Vegas, he got a penalty for a false start, where he's obviously, with
Yeah,
the way that F1 cars work nowadays, and even in the late 90s when they had semi-automatic gearboxes, the clutch is hand operated, so it's an extremely precise movement and point at which, just like in a road car with your clutch pedal, where you balance the throttle and the clutch to give the car a perfect start without any wheel spin, which you probably in a road car won't experience in first gear, but in an F1 car with 1,000 horsepower there or thereabouts, it's easy to get wheel spin. So both McLarens had that. Irvine also in the Ferrari had a bit of a creep forward, and obviously nowadays with telemetry out the ears that's used in Formula One and by the FIA to rule on the sport, that would be picked up in a heartbeat. So he'd have got a penalty for that. And Frentzen as well on pole, he loads the clutch, so to speak, slightly earlier than everybody else, and the car moves slightly. So yeah, it was black and white why the cars were to show which cars were cheating. But despite that, none of those cars that jumped the start were penalised. It was purely for the FIA to see who was cheating, and then they'd take action further on down the road. So the official explanation was for the lights was because the start procedure was aborted due to two cars not being in the right position. So it was clear as day on TV to the spectators. Hang on a minute, all of these cars at the front, the top teams, all launched at the same time when none of the other 17, 16 odd cars moved because the lights hadn't gone out. So that's how it was revealed to the world.
Yeah, and the key thing to note is that none of these cars were actually penalised. No team was penalised, even though they clearly jumped the start. Um, well, I think this is so strange, and the more I actually read about this, it does make you think the FIA was, I guess, really clever at utilising loopholes. Um, because the start procedure was aborted and they had to do an aborted start, the detection loops for a jump start weren't active. So they weren't able to actually say, well, there you go, you jumped the start, even though clearly they could see it. Um, I guess some of the reasons that some people on the internet have given are the FIA wanted to catch who reacted early. They didn't want to cause a scandal, um, and they wanted just to change the rules later, use this as a precedent to see how many teams are doing it, and I guess quietly deal with it rather than making a big fuss. I don't think it went that way. Now that we're talking about it 26 years later, um, yeah, I guess what happened after that, um, no steward's notes, like there are almost no documents about this issue. It is simply a myth because no official document says that there were jump start sensors failing. No one publicly announced this. It was just something that F1 fans and, including us, are talking about to this very day. And it's still not clear. We've never had a clear clarification from the FIA on what happened that day, why they did it. So that's just weird. Which leads me to believe that it was a trap. Um, do you want to talk a bit about what kind of came afterwards? I mean, it's quite interesting, actually, what came of this.
Yeah, so in 2001, not too long afterwards, the FIA actually legalised launch control, which, by today's standards, is quite an odd thing for them to do. But they did allow teams to use basically automated starts, so there'd be little to no input from the driver at the start. I think they'd just have the brake on and plant their foot on the throttle and off they go. The main reason why they did it is because at the time, obviously, with technology advancing nowadays, it's just the obvious choice to do this. But at the time, policing electronics and tiny sensors and auditing everything was quite difficult. And there were a lot of grey areas in it. So obviously, on one side of the argument, it's the FIA's job is to adjudicate and dish out punishment where necessary. So one way or another, they had to figure out who was cheating because it's obviously a breach of the rules. So they were right to do what they did. But on the other hand, the image of the FIA would have been put into disrepute because they basically ignored their own rules to prove something that was just a rumour. But nonetheless, it's been exciting for us, and I'm sure the drivers at the time weren't happy, but it's not really their fault. So yeah, following that, everyone was allowed to use an automated start because it was just simply easier to lay out a rule and say everyone can use it, not just a few certain teams, which would give them an advantage. So, in summary, essentially, multiple cars did jump the start visually. That's as clear as day at the Nürburgring. No penalties were issued despite it, because the FA wanted to cover up their own sort of wrongdoings. If you're that way inclined, they blamed it on an aborted start due to two back markers not being positioned right on the restart. And still to this day, we've not had full official clarification of which teams developed what technologies, managed to secretly implement them, because there are no FIA documents. And obviously, if they did something slightly underhanded and against the rules, they're not going to self-report in an FIA document and say, yes, we didn't tell any of the teams that we were going to change the timing, and therefore the outcome of the start of a race, which they can't interfere in. So that sums up the 1999 European Grand Prix start procedure, light, sensor,
Scandal.
launch control scandal.
Yeah. It's also, important to note that this was a chaotic Grand Prix in itself, anyways. There's multiple DNFs at the start with, I believe, Damon Hill and a few other backmarker cars, and also Johnny Herbert's very few F1 wins was that 1999
Yep.
European Grand Prix. So, yeah, I guess a crazy race will be remembered for some time for multiple reasons. But yeah, to this day, 26 years later, we still do not have official documentation, and probably will never will have any official word from the FIA on this. This has been a very quick deep dive, but this has been a great topic, and I really want to do more of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything else on that, Miles?
No, I think it's obviously one of those interesting cases. Another thing that we've decided to talk about is, we like to talk about niche stuff. Like, I think one of our very early episodes was about the 2015 winter testing incident with Fernando Alonso and the McLaren. And again, that's another thing that maybe the FIA weren't involved in, that didn't have a hand in or manipulate anything there. But they have kept it under wraps for 10 years now. I love stuff like that. It's it's if you picture the iceberg format, that's got to be right at the bottom somewhere, or near it anyway.
Yeah.
Because I defy anyone that got into this sport from Drive to Survive to tell me about Fernando Alonso being electrocuted and waking up thinking he's 12 again and races for Ferrari or something. So yeah, I love stuff like this, and I think it does make you wonder how much stuff is going on in Formula One that we don't know about. Because, this year is probably a textbook example. We've literally just this past weekend seen McLaren have both of their cars disqualified from the Las Vegas Grand Prix for excessive plank wear, and that has led to people saying, well, earlier on in the season, here's this onboard from Bahrain where the McLaren's rear plank is sparking like crazy and none of the other cars are doing it. Why has this not been looked into sooner? And then fast forward all the way to Brazil, which was only a few races ago, it was happening there, and people were saying, well, hang on a minute, McLaren's car's riding quite low. What's going on? They're obviously very fast. Is that part of it? Obviously that's, still in progress, but probably a more recent example I can think of would be in 2019 with Ferrari and their power unit and their fuel flow secret, where the engine was sipping fuel in between the sensor to monitor fuel flow, therefore giving them a huge straight line speed advantage. The outcome of that was that I think Ferrari must have just had an agreement with the FIA under the table, probably paid a disgustingly large amount of money to not have it exposed to the
Yeah,
public. And yeah, the 2020 Ferrari was crap as
abysmal.
a result. So,
Yeah,
the details of that agreement has been kept under lock and key, and the only reason we know about it is because of probably how bad the 2020 F1, 2020 Ferrari car was, which I think was it called the Ferrari 1000 or something, F1000,
I
like
believe so.
1,000 races in Formula One, something like
Yeah,
that.
I don't know.
But yeah, anyway, it just interests me, and yeah, the FIA is always seems to be at the centre of controversy.
No,
So
I agree. I, you know, I suspect in 30 years' time there'll be many more scandals and yeah, conspiracies to come. Well, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of the Race Reaction podcast. Um, that's yeah, been a great episode. Thank you so much, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.
bye bye.